Chapter 12 of Heat. Manny suggested they hire somebody to play the part of Michael's dad. Have the guy show up in a nice suit, Manny said, smile for the camera, say how proud he was of his little boy, and then they could all be done with it. Don't take this the wrong way, Michael said to him, but you're insane. They were in Michael's apartment in the middle of the afternoon, hanging out until the Clippers' grand concourse game at Macomb Dam Park. Benny had been coming up with one crazy plan after another, even though Carlos had decided that they weren't going to do anything about Mr. Lima's invitation, at least not for the time being. If Mr. Lima called again or stopped by, Carlos would say that they was going to wait a few more days for their father, and if he wasn't back by next week, then they'd just have to come down to the borough president's office without him. For now their story was that their uncle had suffered a setback. "I'm sure you understand, sir," Carlos had said, rehearsing the scene, pretending Michael was Mr. Lima. "Family has to come first." Manny said they were just putting off the inevitable, that they should do it now and get it over with. He imagined the whole thing as a movie now, one he was making up as he went along, the kind where the kids got together and put one over on the adults. The kind, Michael thought, that always had a happy ending. "Works with me. Work with me on this, Star," Manny said. "We could use one of the men who live in the building." "Yeah," Michael said. "We'll get Mr. Chu. That ought to fool them." "It's a good thing I'm the only one who sees the snippy side of you," Manny said. He was still lying on the floor in front of the pillow they'd set up as a goal in the sock hockey. On his back, hands laced behind his head, eyes full of fun. Michael knew his game. If he acted as if he wasn't taking any of this too seriously, then maybe Michael wouldn't worry as much. "What about your super, Mr. Ruiz?" Manny said. "What about him?" "He's about the right age. He's dark like us, and," Manny said, "you seem to be the only person in the whole world he actually likes. Until Carlos can't come up with the rent money. You know, my parents would help out if it ever came to that." "You know the deal," Michael said. "Carlos and me don't want your parents to get involved. Your dad's with the fire department. It makes him an official person. Even if he doesn't act like one, if he finds out there's no parent here, he's supposed to tell." "He'd never tell in a million years, officially or unofficially," Manny said. "I'm getting hungry again, by the way." Huge surprise. First, back to my brilliant plan. No. We could get Mr. Ruiz to shave his ugly beard of his and that mustache. Nobody will recognize him when he's standing there like a proud papa. Michael said, "If I let you finish the Oreos, will you stop this?" "You didn't tell them there were a backup bag of Oreos?" "You didn't ask." "Where?" "Fridge. In the drawer where Carlos keeps the lettuce." Then he rolled up in sitting position, gave Michael what was supposed to be a mean look, disappeared into the kitchen. From in there Michael heard, "Somebody puts Oreos in with vegetables? That means they're hiding them." He came in with a fistful of the greatest cookies ever invented and tossed one to Michael. "Back to my plan," he said. Michael said, "We lie enough already. Man the man. And that is no lie. Every time an adult says something like, 'Your father must be so proud,' I feel like all they have to do is take one look at my face and know something's wrong. We just need to get through the season, Star. We both know that. Carlos keeps saying we will, but he never tells me what his plan is. He's probably afraid you'll shoot the sucker down like you do my plans," Manny said. "We need something to wash these down with. Back into the kitchen, back with 2 glasses of milk." Sometimes Michael found himself wondering how many visits to 825 Gerard per week Manny would have to make before Carlos had to think about taking on a third job. "You sure would have enough snacks," Michael said. "I wouldn't want your stomach to start growling about the fourth inning." "Is that a dig? Are you saying I eat too much?" "Never," Michael said. He drank down all of his milk and said, "You ready to go play baseball?" "I can't believe you even have to ask," Manny said. Maybe Ellie would be there today, Michael thought. Even with everything else on his mind, he never went too long these days without thinking about the pretty girl, the mystery girl with the long legs. Sometimes he wondered what her secret were. Grand Concourse was their second to last game before the playoffs. The Clippers had played them the very first week of the season, but Grand Concourse, the team nickname, was the Pinstripers, in honor of the Yankees, didn't have three of their best kids that day because they'd come down with some kind of stomach virus. Michael had started the game, but in a 12-0 for the Clippers after two innings and 14-0 in the fourth, at which point the slaughter rule had gone into effect. Game over. But the Pinstripers, they knew, had become a good team after that, and were now in the fourth place in the District 22. "They're going to have a little something to prove," Mr. Minya said during batting practice, "so we're going to need our A game if we want to stay in first." Mr. Minya talked about their A game a lot, another one of his favorite expressions. Now Manny said to Mr. Minya, "You sure don't like B plus will do the job tonight?" Before Mr. Minya could answer, Cal said, "This close to the playoffs, when we might have to play their sorry butts again, I'm not sure we should show them our A game, even our B game." Michael smiled. "I see what Cal means, Mr. M." Manny said, "Coach, you think Michael's saying we all need our C game? Wow. I hope he's not taking them lightly." Anthony Theoro sang, "Now we've said our ABCs." Mr. Minya walked away, shaking his head, saying, "We've all obviously spent too much time together." "No worries, Coach," Manny called after him. "We always give you an A for effort." "Just play hard," the coach said, and, together, Michael and Keller, Manny and Anthony yelled, "Have fun!" Michael struck out the side of the top of the first, 3 up, 3 down, 11 pitches. He also hit his first over-the-fence home run of the season, a two-run job in the bottom of the first. He looked like they might be on their way to another slaughter rule win, when they scored 5 more runs after that, to make 7-0. At this point, Mr. Minya announced he was going to let Michael pitch one more inning, and then was going to let Maria pitch, for the first time all season. Michael saw Ellie after he struck out the first two Pinstripers in the top of the second. She was sitting on the hill beyond the basketball court, by herself as usual. He'd heard somebody on the bench say it was 5 minutes to 7, which meant the Yankee game was about to start. They were back from their road trip. El Grande scheduled to start against the Minnesota Twins, a team he'd nearly no-hit the other time he'd faced them this season, back in June. Michael got 2 fast strikes on what was going to be his last batter of the night, unless the guy got on, which Michael knew he wasn't going to do. Not the way he felt tonight. One of those nights when he felt as if he could pitch this way for all 6 innings without even breaking a sweat. 1 strike to go now. For Ellie's benefit, nobody else's, he kicked up his right leg even higher than usual. El Grande high, really doing it up. But he must have moved slightly on the rubber to where the pinstriper pitch had been pushing off into the dirt, and his left toe got stuck up in a small hole there, and because of his high kick, he lost his balance. He proceeded to fall right on his butt. The ball still in his left hand. Even the batter knew it was all right to step out of the box and laugh, because all of Michael's teammates and Mr. Minya were doing the exact same thing. Sitting there next to the mound, Michael couldn't help it. He laughed too. Manny called time and came walking out to the mound. Michael was still down. Manny looked down at him and said, "I'm not sure what the degree of difficulty was, but you sure of heck struck the landing." Michael stood up, cleaned himself off as best he could, got back on the mound, and immediately looked past the basketball courts. He wanted Ellie still to be there, because he planned to hustle over there as soon as the half inning was over. At the same time, though, he hoped she'd missed his clown show. She hadn't. It was as if she had been waiting patiently for him to look over at her, as if she knew he would, as if they really did have some kind of mental telepathy going, because as soon as he looked at her, she went into an exaggerated high-kick motion of her own, a perfect right-hander impression of what he just tried to do. Then she was the clown show, only on purpose, staggering into a fall, rolling down the hill. When she got to the bottom, she stood up, put her hands above her head, and applauded him. Michael could see she was laughing too. He shook his head as if shaking off one of Manny's signs and got back on the mound. He went with the shorter kick this time, then burned one in for the strike 3. When he looked past the basketball court to see if Ellie had seen that one, she was gone. or maybe just hiding. Michael thought about going over to look for her, then decided he would stay on the bench for the rest of the game, be a good teammate, and cheer his team on if he wasn't playing. So he did. Every once in a while he could remember Ellie tumbling down the hill and smile. One of these nights he thought they were going to have a lot to talk about if she ever hung around long enough. The Clippers ended up winning 10-6. Maria gave up some runs, and they hit a few hard balls off her, but she did pretty well, pitching better than some of the blowout games, just to give them a chance. They all went rushing on the mound after the final out, and if she were the one who'd won the World Series game, then got into the line to shake hands with the Pinstripers. You guys are the only ones acting this excited because I'm a girl, she said. No way, Manny said. You pitched great, said a girly boy, Cal said. Manny said, I heard that. I was right after that when Mr. Gibbs, the Grand Concourse coach, came over to Mr. Minion and asked if they could have a word with him. Michael watched the two men walk down into the right field line. They stayed out there a long time, Mr. Gibbs doing most of the talking, and whatever he was saying, Michael could see that Mr. Minion didn't like it very much, because he kept shaking his head, taking his cap off, and rubbing his forehead hard, the way he would when something went wrong for the Clippers during a game. When he came back to the bench, Michael asked if something had happened during the game to make Mr. Gibbs mad. I wish, Mr. M said, but it's a little more serious than that. Then he told Michael that there had been an official complaint made by the Westchester South team demanding that the Clippers produce Michael's birth certificate. But I gave you the envelope my father gave me, Michael said, knowing he had given it to Mr. M only days before Poppy had died. You did, Mr. M said, just not the one with your birth certificate inside. Mr. Gibbs found out when he had somebody at the league office pull Michael's file, and what they came up with was a baptism certificate that the commissioners would sometimes accept for foreign-born players. And if they asked me, I could have saved them the trouble of checking, Mr. M said. Your father told me he thought your birth certificate was with the rest of the papers he brought over with him, but he couldn't find it. Just a baptism certificate, which I've used plenty of times in the past. Mr. Gibbs said that as far as he knew, nobody had ever questioned the authenticity of one of those baptism certificates until now. But that unfortunately, everything was different now in the Little League baseball, especially in the Bronx, ever since Danny Almonte turned out to be older than what he said he was. Gibbs said the bottom line was they had to take it to the District 22 Board of Directors, Mr. M said. And did they, Michael said. Mr. M said they'd just gotten off the conference call and called Mr. Gibbs on his cell. Michael could tell by the look of Mr. M's face that the news wasn't good. They decided that until a birth certificate is on file, you're not eligible to play, Mr. M said.